apparently they were still playing like it was neck and neck with baseball in like the 1800s, and like the guys who codified baseball were cricket pros who decided to, change things up a little bit.
Yeah, like the Boston rule set for baseball looks way more similar to cricket, where I think in the Boston rules there was like no foul territory.
The Boston game.
Yeah, that's what they called it. And then the baseball, as we know it now, is the New York game.
Yeah.
So if we had followed the naming convention of like rugby, baseball could have just been called New York. I guess if New York were a smaller town, maybe that would have stuck. But I don't know. Well, it's episode 274, A View from 202. A podcast after a
Do you have it on your watch? Like
no, that's just number? A nervous tick. I'm just fiddling with my watch. That would make a lot more sense if I, instead of having a day on my watch, it just said whatever podcast episode.
That says our episode number.
If I just every week I ticked it over from 273 to 274. That's kind of funny, actually. I should do that. This is coming on the heels of a big Red Bulls loss to Inter Miami FC 6-2. Last week we were saying, we might be on the precipice of decent, okay form into bad form with a big loss. And lo and behold, that is what has happened here. It's the four of us recapping this loss and looking forward to a flurry of games coming up on the weekend and our first midweek game, I believe, of the year. Well, how do you guys feel about this? I feel like we had a bit of an irony at the beginning of last week's episode where we did so much disclaiming about, the Knicks game is on, yada, yada. The Knicks ended up losing that game, but winning the series, of course. But the real thing was we had all that patter about college night, and that really what was happening when we're recording is that the protests were kicking off, and the way you can tell the Red Bulls did not have an authentic college night is that if it were, NYPD would have been there with their little siege machine, knocking down the doors and picking up books. Yeah, imagine if NYPD went through ESC and was like, whoa, empire. These kids, they want to start an empire. An empire state.
They have somebody's given them lyrics. They've given them song sheets to sing from.
Yeah, something about a Forza. Yeah. So maybe next year the Red Bulls can aspire to that level of collegiate achievement.
They're saying shake it up. Something like sounds like somebody wants to overthrow the state.
Yeah.
If you ask me.
Yeah.
That's only the kind of message that comes from an outside.
Right. Outside agitators regularly come to this arena.
Yeah, but if only we had away fans anymore these days. But
that has fallen off, hasn't it?
Away fans?
Yeah.
It really has.
We like to criticize our own, but rest of the league does not really seem to have a fire lit under it either.
The ideal away day happens midday on the weekend.
That's true. Yeah, that actually is true.
Not at 7:30.
Yeah. Although, I guess if you were going to go make a weekend trip out of any away day, it would be to New York, or Montreal or whatever works too.
Weirdly enough,
we're not like Columbus.
Weirdly enough that we're talking about this, there was a weirdly decent crowd, it looked like, for Red Bulls fans in Miami for this game, although how much of that is just... I think we've talked about a lot over the years how much there just seems to be kind of like an ambient Red Bulls fan base in Florida.
Yeah.
Of like, not only expats, but just generally just weird Florida people, it feels like sometimes. But then also, a lot of people probably just wanting to go down for the Messi game or, Lord knows. But seemed to be decent numbers for us whenever the camera was panning over there. Too bad they had to witness what they saw.
Yeah, so it was a 6-2 loss. At the half, It was 1-0 to the Red Bulls, though. So, unfortunately, this is a game where we have 6 goals, of course, conceded in one half. I struggled to think of a bigger implosion or half other than the Santos game, infamously, where we let in 4 goals in what felt like 10 minutes. It might have just been that we gave up 2 goals in 10 minutes there.
Orlando Open Cup.
Right. Okay. I knew I was forgetting. Yeah, that was all second half.
Good shout.
And I'm sure there was also a pandemic game that I've probably written off because those were all fake. Those didn't actually happen.
Wasn't one of the? I think didn't we get messed up in one of the bubble games?
The Derby. We had a Derby at like an empty Yankee Stadium. That's technically our biggest loss. That it was like 5-2 or something.
Oh, I'm kind of remembering that. Yeah,
but that didn't happen.
It really didn't happen. That really left no.
Was that when they won the cup too?
No, that was like 2020, when they were pretty unremarkable too. So I think this is one of the more humbling nights for the team in general, and a different vibe, I think, than. I don't know. I guess this is a question. Was this a different vibe than the other loss on the season, the 3-0 loss to Columbus? It is, after all, only our second loss of the season, which is sort of wild to be sitting here after such a kind of crushing blow, but still be meditating on that fact. What happened in this game? What led to us being up at the half and then having such a big implosion? Were we holding it at bay? Were we lucky to be leading at the half? Or was there something that actually genuinely switched and went wrong at the break?
I think this seems to happen with Miami a lot, where they do change throughout the course of a game, and have historically, I guess this season at least, been better in the second half of games. I could very well believe that they grew into the tempo of the game, just off of their experience and kind of their know-how throughout their roster, because I thought that the beginning of the game was very strong for the Red Bulls in general, and they were able to more or less neutralize any kind of threat coming from Miami. But as the course of the game shifts, even after we score the goal, it seems like the ways that we open up just feel very basic. I think even you mentioned that they seem to just be playing very basic football and just getting it through. But yeah, I think they were just able to figure out exactly the inches and feel and off tempos that kind of just honestly just made it look really easy to score against us. But it's weird because I think in general, this is less of a complete loss than the Columbus game. Because we were, when we were watching the highlights, I had mentioned that even when we were down to 3-1, I thought like there was still kind of a little bit of fight left in the team and had a little bit more to give. But, then I think the fourth goal was super crushing. And the way that Suarez finished it just is a little deflating.
The fourth goal was the one we were just seeing with
kind of
Edelman,
a scissor kick
with Edelman,
hands up,
with the counterattack thing. Yeah, I want to get that later. This is kind of it makes me absolutely sick to be saying some of what I'm about to say, but this is kind of a game where you do sort of have to hand it to them, kind of like what Peaches was just saying. I mean, if anybody knows how to exploit weaknesses in a game, if anybody who has seen, everything, possible thrown at them in a soccer match at any level, it's the group of guys who are on Miami, and in particular Messi. Sorry, they're just really good players, and really good players can just kind of do that sometimes. This is, it's actually even like, it was just occurring to me while you were saying that just now, Peaches, that I don't think it was a quote from Guardiola himself, but it was some, like I said, it's making me sick to say all this, but just my mouth tastes like garbage, but
We'll get you some soap.
yeah, but there was some kind of quote. It might have been one of the coaches who took over Barcelona after Guardiola, but basically saying like, as far as like, you know, setting up tactics and strategy and all that kind of stuff, he was kind of like, you know, that my job is a little bit different from that, because this group of players that you have here, especially when they've been playing together so long, they know what to do. They know how to manage game states. They know how to react to situations. They know how to exploit, you know, weaknesses and openings that they see. That's just kind of like the difference. That's the edge that the most elite players have over, you know, other guys who maybe have the same kind of technical level or whatever. And if there's any team in MLS that's had that sort of cheat code, it's this group of Barcelona alumni.
Yeah, and I think Tata Martino understands that.
Well, it might have even literally been. It didn't even occur to me just now that
It could be
Tata
Tata.
Martino was one of those Barcelona successors. So it might have even been his quote that I'm citing just now there. But yeah, I mean, you know, that's you just said pizzas, and as we were kind of going over watching the tape just now, where it's like, yeah, Miami did make it look easy. They did make it look like we were really easy to score against. We know we're not that easy to score against in most games. So what was the different denominator here? I think it was probably not only Messi, but the rest of Miami being actually turned on and up for the game. Which they obviously weren't in Harrison a couple months ago when the result was obviously reversed. And I think that's another illustrator too of just like, you know, just that extra edge, that extra level of motivation, or lacking that extra edge or level of motivation, is literally like a 10-goal sweep or a 10-goal, you know, gap, you know, in this, as far as this fixture this year is concerned.
But I think what you're just
yeah.
mentioning right now is the double-edged sword of having this experience too, right? It's like, how do you motivate these guys who've seen everything and won everything week in, week out? And you don't necessarily do that on away games. And I think maybe the youth in this team and kind of like that hunger has given us that like edge. It's
well, and just to touch again more kind of granularly on what you were just saying, and what I'm piggybacking on as far as growing into the game and exploiting situations. We've remarked, you know, going back years now, that there's so many games this team plays where, yes, the press is working and we're causing problems for the other team with the press, but that other team kind of realizes that if they just, you know, step it up a gear, if they just, you know, make their passing one little notch quicker, they can get around it. And in this Miami game, it's that, you know, on steroids, with the kind of players that they have. So.
Yeah, and Peaches, when you mention Miami changing at the half, yeah, it really sticks out compared to our last game, even with the absences and even with the rain. You know, that was a game where we were also up 1-0 at the half, and then Miami came out late and really never really came out at all, because then we scored 3 more and lumped it on top of them, and tables are turned a little bit. But you know, for the home game, I think like Messi was notably gone for that, but that was a game that did still have like Jordi Alba, it still had Busquets, it still had Suarez. Suarez was very muted and sort of neutralized in that home game. Obviously, he scores the hat trick here that was not achieved at all. So yeah, it's a tough situation, and I think we're the players, you could also see, got a little overwhelmed. There was that goal that I think you guys mentioned already, the scissor kick from Suarez, where to me it's apparent that Tolkien is playing extremely conservative there. Mm-hmm. And I think if that's any other player, he's more willing to try to stand him up and tackle him at some point. I think he probably had just subconsciously entered damage limitation mode. That you see that happen a couple times in this match. And that's not the way to get yourself back into a game like this. I think you still got to have that edge and that courage, I think, to really push through. And I think one thing that also stuck out to me as well is this is a game where we had to use Wiki Carmona in the midfield again. And I think his limitations were very similar as last week. I mean, Frankie Amaya is able to start alongside Edelman, but we saw for one of the first 2 goals, I think it was Miami's second goal, if not maybe the third, is Carmona kind of receiving the ball in a more central part of the pitch. And it struck me how similarly it looked to a lot of passages of play against Vancouver, where he really was just still playing only in one direction. He didn't have the sort of awareness or patience to like dribble out of space or like even look the other direction, and it almost looked like Miami was surprised to see him like voluntarily squeeze us back into the same corner that we were in, and it results in a sloppy pass back, a rush pass back, and then Miami seizes on it. And for me, that seemed kind of like a pivotal moment where the game got out of our control.
I do just want to like note though on what you're saying, because I think it adds to sort of the big picture of this game and the big picture of this season as well, that on that Carmona goal, your critique just now, which I think is valid and incorrect, is that the issue was not that they were playing the ball on the ground and they were trying to play out of the back. It's just that they were playing out of the back poorly, and that Carmona, made a bad decision, positioned himself poorly. You're not saying that what we should have done is just booted that out, which was, I think a lot of the, seemed to be a lot of the discourse online, or, just for lack of another forum, as far as hearing what, kind of the general opinion was that, oh, you just got to boot it out. We got to boot it out in situations like that. Maybe, but I don't know. If you're trying to play the way this team is this season and you're actually trying to, build a possession game and build out of the back and become more fluent with the ball, you got to kind of take goals like that sometimes. You got to kind of just, accept that you're going to get burned in situations like that sometimes, especially when you're using younger players like we insist on doing. So, that's kind of a thing where it's a bit of an ideological hinge there for what this team wants to be and where we want to go. Because I mean, yeah, if we just want to play games or if we want to approach a game where we're just being pragmatic and booting it out and just not actually trying to stick to any sort of system or conviction about how we want to play, then yeah, you're going to end up with another muddled Arma Struber year where everything ends up kind of a mess. If we're going to commit, like Schwartz has been doing somewhat successfully over the first few months of this season, if we're going to commit to playing more on the ground and playing a little bit more of a fluid style, then you have to accept that those moments are going to happen sometimes, especially against good teams. So that's just sort of like something that I had in my craw in general about this game and what the result is and how the reaction to it should be.
Right, because Wiki Carmona in that instance is facing towards goal, and I don't think really.
Well, it's a situation where Reyes picks up the ball. Reyes is in the position to, collect the ball and clear it after Miami's attack fizzles out. And like I'm saying, like in a parallel universe where we're not trying to kind of class up the way we play this season, yeah, Reyes probably does just boot it out. But no, we're actually trying to, do a little bit more and trying to, grow as a team. And when you're trying to grow, there's going to be some situations where there's some fuck ups like that, and you just got to accept it, or else you're throwing out everything you've worked on previously.
Right. And I agree with you that
and balancing that is what Schwartz has to do over the course of the season. But yeah, go ahead.
Right, and I agree with you. I think the diagnosis is more that in that instance, Wiki Carmona should have been more aware and confident in the ball that he gives. And if anyone is to boot it out, it's the center back facing that way.
Well, that's the thing as far as like, should Wiki Carmona know how to play that exact situation? I'm not saying that to be like, he shouldn't. I'm saying it to be more like, I don't get the sense that he has been trained for this specific role. I mean, as we've remarked on for years now, it's unclear what Wiki Carmona even does. I mean, we had so many different formations and systems that were used under Struber. Then he was in and out of the team. And now we're here with Schwartz, who seems to be dedicated to the 4-4-2, where the only real role for Carmona to have is in that left-sided or just, either-sided attacking mid role. But is that really his best position? Is that what he's best suited to? I don't know. He's just like kind of a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, whatever, Venezuelan flyer prospect in a better world with a team that was actually constructed to win games rather than to set up transfers or prove some ideological point, we would have a player who fully fits the character of that position in that position, but we don't. We have kind of a mess of the squad. So
Is that our
that's
weakest?
another just kind of big picture issue from this game.
Is that our weakest position on the field right now?
Like attacking mid, wide attacking mid.
Like a right-sided attacking mid.
If we're going to play, and this actually ties into a conversation I was having on Twitter the night of the game with Jeremiah, Red Coach Jay, who hopefully you know from Twitter. If you don't follow him, he's a great tactical analyst of the team on game nights. But he was remarking on Forsberg's pass for the opening goal, which we haven't even remarked on yet, but set up great. I mean, I'll hand it to Forsberg. I haven't been his biggest fan over the course of the season, but this was a genuinely impressive pass to spring a counterattack and spring the goal that Van Zer eventually put away in their first half. But I was talking with Jeremiah when he was posting about that goal and talking with him about how there's kind of this impression when Forsberg came in that, he's a 10, he's a playmaker, he's the creative, fantasista or whatever that this team's been crying out for. And that's not even really the way he is an attacking midfielder. He's a lot more of, I described it talking with Jeremiah as like a Landon Donovan kind of attacking midfielder where he runs with the ball, kind of springs counterattacks like that, sort of waits for guys to run in front of him while, the whole team is running. It's not as much kind of like half court, like, studs on the ball, kind of, picking out passes sort of 10. It's different from that. And to speak again to the idea of Landon Donovan's, interpretation of attacking midfield, Donovan's, most thriving period, both with the U.S. team and with the Galaxy under Arena, was in this exact kind of empty bucket 4-2-2-2, 4-4-2, whatever you want to have it, system or formation, where the attacking mids are out wide and positioned out wide. And, for the U.S., Donovan and Dempsey were kind of perfect dovetails as far as, what types of skills they had, what they did in different parts of the field that really made those roles pop. And I don't know that we have players that are designed for those roles in this team right now. We have Forsberg, obviously, but as we remarked on, in preseason and has seemed to already been an issue so far this year, he's not going to be there for every single game. And he shouldn't be relying on one player anyway. And outside of that, we don't really have players who really thrive in that kind of role. I even saw people saying like, it was a mistake to get rid of Luquinhas because he would have been good in this system. And we've mentioned that on this show sometimes too, but even him, I don't think would have been necessarily a good fit for that specific role in this 4-2-2-2. Yengar is a lot more of kind of a north-south winger as opposed to a, kind of more well-rounded attacking mid. Harper is kind of same thing. Just kind of going through the list, we don't really have a lot of other attacking midfield options, certainly not ones who I think would fit, the multi-directional sort of requirements of that role. So that's one of many issues with the way this squad is designed.
And when you say the Dempsey role, like what is sort of the prototype and skill set that would complement Forsberg for that?
I mean, well, with Dempsey in particular, if you just want to use that precise analogy, I mean, Dempsey kind of dovetailing as opposed to Donovan, Dempsey a little bit, kind of a taller, more kind of like, stationary foot on the ball kind of player, more kind of like going for goal, poaching for goal and stuff like that. Whereas Donovan was sort of behind play and on the periphery of play. If there's anybody in our squad right now who maybe does a lot of the same things in that situation or that setup that Dempsey did, I mean, I don't know if I even see it, but,
I was gonna say,
it might have to be him. Yeah,
I think on the technical archetype, Van Zer.
Maybe even, but yeah.
Well, I was gonna say if you look at it from like a satellite image that's kind of like really grainy, I could kind of see the archetype for Van Zer. But in terms of like the try shit attitude, of Dempsey. I think that like Lewis Morgan is definitely filling
That's
that
true.
role.
That's
at
true.
least, you know.
That actually, that's. I don't know. I mean, completely escaped my mind. That yeah, I mean, not necessarily the same type of player. And actually, Morgan has a bit of, and again, this is another squad balance issue, but a lot of things that are kind of redundant with Forsberg, I guess, as far as being a bit of a runner, more than a stationary 10, but obviously we're using Morgan up top to great effect so far this year. So I don't know how we can really sling him back without losing something else there, as we found out this year. But that's a good shout too, because I mean, like Dempsey, Morgan eventually coaches just decided, just throw him up top,
just trash it.
just throw him up top where he's closest to goal, and good things will happen,
and he'll do stuff.
Right.
I will say, on the sixth front, like in terms of our holding midfielders, Ronald Doncourt comes into the game, and I think that he like very much looks like he's ready to be a central midfielder on this team.
Yeah,
and it's garbage minutes, but I just like I think
garbage minutes.
right? Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
like the big obviously asterisk. But I think in terms of like when he receives the ball and does like half turns, he looks like he could like.
No, he's
like play into that space.
I've only seen him maybe play like a cumulative like 12
15
minutes of
minutes,
soccer
yeah.
in my entire life, but he's looked pretty nifty.
Right.
Like,
I think that it'd be kind of cool to see him have more minutes there. But also, I think when we remarked on how Tolkien was guarding Messi on that one goal, he was kind of like guarding him like a holding midfielder would try to block someone instead of like I think a fullback. I do still think it'd be interesting to see Tolkien experimented in that central role at some point if we ever had the roster capabilities to do so.
Yeah, but there's only one left back in the world, and it's John Tolkien. We can't sign another left back.
That's so true.
But I mean, it does seem like Kyle Duncan is legitimately our backup left back at this point. He gets the start this week. Was there any news about Dylan Nealis? I mean, Dylan Nealis he was on the bench. He's one of the better performances for this season so far. This seems a bit conspicuous.
Did Duncan play against Miami when they came to New York? I don't know if there was anything there.
that's interesting to think about if he did. I guess we're
I
going to look
can't-
it up right now. But
Yeah, he had a good
Duncan
matchup.
played on the left.
Because remember, Schwartz used that exact same lineup the next week, explicitly under the premise of like, I want to
Keep the
reward,
thing going.
keep chemistry going, and reward these guys. Yeah, so
The opposite.
maybe
of
maybe
what we've
he,
experienced.
maybe he's like
But I don't.
still
Yeah.
on
At the end
that
of the
tip.
day, though, like Duncan playing wasn't the reason we lost 6-2.
No, yeah.
So
No.
No, I mean, that was another good point that Jeremiah made on game night, which was that, like, yeah, comprehensive losses like that are not on individuals. This is something that the team as a whole just didn't get right on the day.
it's kind of like, I guess I have golf on the mind, obviously, but like during a golf swing, right? Like you have to kind of keep a lot. There's a famous Nike commercial, I think, with Tiger Woods kind of describing every like thing you keep in mind during a golf swing. But like if one thing goes off, like the whole thing kind of comes off. I feel like our system, it shouldn't be like that, obviously, necessarily. But sometimes when the triggers are wrong, everything just kind of falls apart.
Well, that was Struber's mantra for 3 fucking years was that if we're not at 100%, if we're not 100% perfect, then you might as well just fucking not even play.
Right, but
who
like,
even fucking cares?
You have to at least set yourself up for a bad miss,
But I
right?
mean, literally, like, if one player is off, if one player is not 100%, then the whole thing
Everything falls
collapses.
apart, yeah.
It's just like, I don't know. That sounds like a shitty system, but
Right,
whatever.
right.
You
I mean,
know.
soccer is I think more forgiving than other sports in that way usually, where it's so hard to score a goal that you can get outclassed and still only lose 1-0 in some
Right.
games, because compared to like golf or like, baseball, if a pitcher has a bad night, like game's over, it's much easier for someone to get totally blown out. So it's conspicuous. I mean, yeah, Cork, to your point, is conspicuous that the Red Bull system seems to enable this sometimes more than others. But
Right, and even when you have like those things set up where it does require all this intricacy, you have to have the the contingency of even if it doesn't work, like even if you miss, it should still be going in the direction that you want it to
Although,
go.
I'll sort of contradict myself because, I think I didn't enjoy the like high floor, low ceiling Struber ball thing where like everything was a slog and we rarely got blown out. And I think to what you were saying earlier, Cork, too, like if you're going to be a little bit more bold and try to like actually grow on how we're playing, and you open yourself up to vulnerability, and that is preferable to what we were seeing from like 2020 to 2023.
Right, but it should be like more of an isolated thing. It's like instead of it being
this is
a
only our
pattern.
second
right,
loss,
exactly.
Right.
So
Yeah, and I just kind of do want to make the point too, while we're on sort of this subject, that not only does everything have to be 100% for things to actually work, but everything being at 100% means players get tired, as we've known for years in this system. Players get tired as the temperatures go up, as we get deeper into the year. Temperatures go up when we go down south. Maybe this was the first game of the summer swoon. We definitely saw, just going through some of the tape just now, that in some of the later goals, that players were definitely jogging, and some players were just, very viscerally upset at everything that was going on and kind of, resigned to their fate. So maybe starting to be, Schwartz will now finally be tested to see if he's the first manager who can kind of find a way to engineer us to not have weird dips in form over the summer.
Yeah, if we are going to have a summer swoon this year, those dropped 2 points against Vancouver, against Chicago start to hurt a little bit. It would have been nice to have that tally. Yeah, that pad. I gotta say my prediction at the beginning of the year is feeling weirdly strong, which was that I think we'd start bright, and I did say specifically that Forsberg would like have a bit of a spark, and I think that sort of happened the first couple weeks. Hasn't turned out so far, but then our depth would begin to get exposed, and I think in many ways we're seeing that with Stroud, of course, out, but then I think also just the lack of experience on the squad too. I think it's fair to wonder if a team with a little bit more wisdom and experience sees out the 3 points and at least two of those home fixtures I mentioned, Vancouver and Chicago, and maybe gets out of this game with Miami with a little bit more pride and tact. That said, I think, the question of this game, now that it's happened, the question of this result is whether it can productively become a sort of learning experience. If this is a game where Schwartz is able to like find some value in drilling the team and instructing the team on how to amend its mistakes, maybe in a couple months we can look back and say that this was sort of a productive loss, in a way, as opposed to the thing I was mentioning earlier of the high floor, low ceiling Struber years, where it felt like there was never any growth, but the bottom never quite fell out. Tentatively, it seems like he was able to do that out of the Columbus game a little bit, where we lost 3-0, but it seems like there was an actual constructive observation of what was not working well for us in that game. This game, maybe a little bit more difficult because, as Cork was saying, to what extent do you just sort of hand it to them at outclassing them? I don't know. Maybe the lesson will be having a short memory.
Not only do they have all these guys, as we just went through, but they also are the first place team in the league. They still are, right?
Yeah, they are after that game, especially.
Pretty handily.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, making sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah,
Lord never knows with this league, but we've already had other games against the top place team in the league, and we've won. Sometimes you're going to lose against the top place team in the league.
Mm-hmm.
We're net zero with the top place team in the league, and through on the way goals. So.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we have a chance. Well, I don't know. Any other final thoughts on this before we start thinking about the upcoming matches? We've got New England on the weekend and DC midweek, but
not to keep. We've talked about attendance more than I think we ever have this season, but it was just funny too to see when we were just watching the tape that like half the Miami fans had left, like even before stoppage time had started.
Yeah.
Just fucking absurd.
Didn't even get to...
All the more reason why it was embarrassing for Morgan to subdue his celebration against those people.
They gotta beat the traffic. They had to go and spend $280 on a plate of fruit at the Miami Grand Prix.
Exactly.
But yeah, beat the traffic mindset is something that I am ideologically opposed to. Anyone who leaves early to beat the traffic should have their sports visitation rights revoked.
Luna seems to agree.
In my opinion. But yeah, and on that front, I do think, we haven't talked about attendance that much, but this is also the most we've, I think, ever talked about Lionel Messi directly on this show, and it was still maybe like 2 minutes.
Yeah. Maybe like 4 mentions of his name.
Yeah. Which, on that front, I'll say, like, I think that's sort of the thing that also throws me off about, like, the cult of personality around him, where, like, to his credit, the way he plays the game, he makes it look so easy and so smooth, and, like, everyone should just be doing that all the time. It makes it hard to really comment on effectively, which is also why, Ray Hudson's shtick got stale, like, a solid 14 years ago now at this point. And it is obviously impressive, but as we've talked about in previous episodes, and don't need to recount at length here, the subtlety and effortlessness of his performance does not match the cult of personality that is sort of insisted upon all of us.
Yeah.
It's a very contrasting tones and
on and off the field.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, he himself, he did that little like Publix thing, but other than that, he's mostly just like minded his business and kept a low pro.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't do tons of like, certainly not going on talk shows and shit. It would be funny to see him like go on Jimmy Fallon and insist on speaking Spanish, but
He should go on like the Breakfast Club.
Oh God. But yeah, no, I mean, it's just kind of, it would be nice, kind of along the lines of what you're saying, that like, yeah, it would be nice if he was just another MLS player, we could just treat him as just a really good player in the league, but
He
instead,
kind of seems like he wants to be treated that way, but no one will let him.
Like honestly, he's like he's kind of grown on me a little bit. I've I've been surprised at like how much he's both surprised at how I wasn't expecting him to be this effective of a player, to be quite honest.
Sure. Yeah.
I was pretty dead set hater and still kind of am on him coming to the league at all, but I was under the impression that like it might just be a huge disaster, knowing Miami's history, but no, he has been pretty good. And like, he has just kind of like you just said, Peaches, like, I think he really does just like, I just kind of want to play my football and like, not be bothered and stuff like that. And Lord knows in this day and age with all the bullshit going on, that's refreshing. It's such a weird paradox that he's at the center of all that stupid bullshit that dominates sports these days, because he himself seems to have kind of a distaste for it. So.
Yeah, I also thought that Suarez would have been fully crocked by now.
True.
Which there were signs earlier in the season that he was heading that way, but,
I mean, it could be, he just needs his friends. We all do better.
It's really the power of friendship, I guess,
Yeah, also Miami is like one of the last like, shots for the millennials to prove we still got
their
it.
grades.
Yeah.
What was the NBA tweet about?
No, yeah, now that the Clippers have lost, it's confirmed. Yeah, it's some guy was like, NBA millennials, everyone get in here. Let's have a pep talk with ourselves. LeBron, Kawhi, Harden, I don't know, Durant, like all these guys, none of them made it to the second round. Not a single one of them. It's closing. So maybe Miami is the last hurrah. We have...
I hope they don't make it to the second round either, so...
Yeah, me neither. I'm gonna expel Emil Forsberg from the Millennial Remembering Guys tour for that, on account for abandoning his family.
He also got getting married at all is a very non-millennial trait.
So true.
Getting married in the first place.
Some older fans will remember the line, "You abandoned a child." Remember that old feud? Yeah. Well.
You were hiding a child.
You're hiding a child. It wasn't you abandoned a child.
Yeah.
Hiding a child. I'm gonna start a Berenstain Bears effect thing about that.
Pusha T.
Yeah.
There Will Be Blood. It was starring Pusha T. Right?
New England on the weekend, Saturday. Do you see this? Do you see this, folks? This post making the rounds. Somebody tweeted a photo of their car with a Revolution sticker, and someone had keyed the sticker.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
What? Like so bad.
Literally, who could that?
That's the most anybody has ever cared about the New England
That has to be
Revolution.
the person's like spouse or something.
Right. It's someone in their it's a rival person in their New Hampshire Libertarian Party.
Yeah, exactly.
like group. You know, the local, Worcester, Massachusetts Republican Party chairman.
The Fellowship of Christian Athletes of Vermont.
Yeah.
Institutional struggle.
Yeah. The Revolution, who
They're bad, right?
I think
They're pretty
so.
bad.
Yeah.
Well, they've been picking up a little bit recently, but I think they're mostly just still in the wake of, again, I just continue to think it was a completely undercovered story last year that really, I think, calls into question a lot of the integrity of the league, but that Bruce Arena was just canceled in the middle of last season when they were a really good team. And lo and behold, when you just blow all that up, the team became a mess.
But also randomly, he was cleared to coach again.
Right, right.
Oh, really? I didn't remember
I
that.
think he's.
It was very
I don't know.
recent. It came out recently.
It was rumored that he was interviewing with clubs and that MLS had given the green light.
Well, the whole thing was such an odd procedural, legalistic thing. The appeal to investigating him when it was never discussed what the investigation was, what the incident was.
And he's had backing from tons of people throughout the game who you would think that if whatever he did was actually bad would not want to be associating themselves with him.
Right.
But he's had tons of support.
And
Well,
then,
Robert Kraft just did the roast of Tom Brady on Netflix. I'm not sure about that.
I do not want to talk about that.
yeah. Well, Robert Kraft has been getting up to all sorts of business.
But no, I legitimately, we can pivot into talking about the game itself and why the team is bad, or why New England is bad now. But just very, very bizarre story that I don't think got nearly enough attention.
Oh, it's uncanny. Yeah.
It's just I think the message you should be taking away from that is that be careful because at any moment now, if you could be one of the top teams in the league, and if the league doesn't like something they're seeing, they can just literally cancel your coach and make him quit.
Or and I don't know how much, again, because the reporting on this was very limited, but the idea that maybe it was Richie Williams throwing a little bit of a coup there.
And Curtin Alpha, who's now the sporting director.
Which is fascinating that after all that, they end up bringing in Caleb Porter.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And, I don't know. I don't know. This is getting to be a little bit mean, but there's just, you see a lot of posts from the general, MLS sort of press corps, and who like to write they like to think they have a nice little long form feature every once in a while, or are really peeling back the history and oh, look at my photo essay of all these old NASL photos or stuff like that. And it wouldn't Bruce Arena, one of the preeminent characters of American soccer, seemingly getting betrayed by his assistant of 20 years, wouldn't that interest you to write a long form piece about that?
Yeah, all of a sudden, all the people who have all the insider info, who are breaking all the scoops, can't figure out what's going on with that one. Couldn't get under the surface for that all of a sudden.
Yeah. I would love it if somebody could dig into that.
And yet I know so much about the Reina family.
Yeah. We
know so much about everything except actual games and teams.
Right.
In MLS. It's not a very good scene these days.
Yeah. Well,
But
I think
anyway,
this all
let's-
speaks to
let's-
New England being such a
yeah.
weird, uncanny team. They also rebranded recently. I mean, this is not news,
3
but
years ago.
the sticker thing reminded me that, oh yeah, they just like quietly, really just redid their whole image. But they are
Which
not.
is funny because I feel like everyone expected that to come with a stadium.
Yeah, I was just about to say they still seem to be just in Foxborough for the long haul. They seem to be getting somewhat decent crowds. Not to
Right,
go back
yeah.
to attendance. Like I think the team
The
being
attendance
the
podcast
team
now.
the team
Yeah.
being good, the team being good under Arena for a few years.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, got people in the seats.
It also
But-
seems like, I mean, the economy notably is sort of weird right now with like inflation being high, consumer confidence being mixed to sort of bad, but consumer spending very high across the board, which reminds me that like MLB's record attendance to this day is still in 2007, right before the bubble burst. Like, and it was like the Dodgers who were like a 500 team that year who said it. It was just that people had a lot of cash that they were spending. Maybe that's what we're seeing across the league a little bit, is that like consumer spending for some reason is high right now, even if people are putting it on credit. I don't know. I'm not an economist, but like that seems to be like a factor in the weird vibes with maybe the revolution, maybe
And
with
us,
us. Yeah.
yeah.
Like it's a strange sense
Like
out
a
there.
weird bubble
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
of
Yeah.
just like general interest.
But yeah,
Right.
just New England, just maybe the weirdest club in the league.
Right.
If it wasn't for us, people would give New England way more shit for being a completely kind of like, dead old Northeastern club that's
are
been
they?
Yeah.
like kind of forgotten by the rest of the league, moved on from by the rest of the league.
Is their roster still like a few US MNT
It's like
castaways?
it's a lot of the same guys they've had since Arena.
is
That's
Josie
I
still
mean that's
there?
part of what's so kind of dramatic about what's happened over the last year is that
The
it's
players
pretty
seem to
much
support
it's
him.
pretty much all the same. It's pretty much all the same guys. It's pretty much the same squad Arena built. They just suck now.
Heel is still there.
Right.
Yeah.
Ooh, Earl Edwards Jr. is still their backup goalkeeper.
Is that Omar Gonzalez still there?
Andrew Farrell,
I don't think he
Still
Gonzalez
going.
is.
Ema Boateng. That's a Bruce special right,
Right.
there.
Wow.
Ian Harks,
Oh right, he's there now.
Dave Romney. That's another Bruce special. And Mark Anthony Kay, which I don't know. He's not a Bruce guy.
No, he's just an MLS guy.
Yeah. But they are in bad form. They did beat Chicago last weekend in Chicago, but as we saw, Chicago very, very uninspiring team. They've lost to a variety of people, including Club America, because New England was in CCL. And how did they get into CCL? I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I mean it's almost definitely because of like probably
Leagues
winning the
Cup.
Shield or one of the conferences under Arena a couple of years ago. But we've been kind of giving CONCACAF and MLS or whoever shit for how all the continental tournaments are set up now, where it just seems like a random assortment of teams that are in it. I think part of that is that they just let too many teams, period, into these tournaments, but also that it's too delayed. Like by the time the tournament that these teams have qualified for comes around, it's been like almost a full calendar year
Yeah, and
since they actually did the thing they qualified.
But it's less
for
so
through.
now than it used to be, right? Because it was like a year and a half.
Well, it used to be manageable to sort of keep track of it when there were fewer teams, like especially with the Mexican calendar. Like I know when whatever tournament that Pumas were the runner up in, it was like a solid year and a half later until they were actually in CCL because of the way it fell.
Right.
Now it's like between Leagues Cup, like I don't know who remembers who finished what in Leagues Cup.
Right.
Like I remember vaguely that Miami won it because everyone was really annoying about it. But I couldn't tell you who else got in there. I know that we played a random ass collection of teams. We played New England and San Luis. I don't know. I don't think New England advanced out of our group. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is that it's
confusing
symptomatic
mess.
that New England is a completely irrelevant team that somehow had to go play in Mexico City for 2 weeks when everyone knew they were going to get waxed, and they did. And that's not a sign of health for the league.
Right.
Anyway, this is a game where You have to say, if the Red Bulls have any pretension of really like hanging in there, like there's Shield, but there's also just like being a top 3 team in the conference. Like they gotta win this one at home for sure. This is the big bounce back game. And I think even looking forward to DC on Wednesday, that is away. And I think it's not crazy to say that we need 4 points here. I think if you really want to seriously think about being up at the top of the table, or is that too much to ask?
I think after a month of at this point now, winless month, I mean, no matter the context, I think you got to get a win at some point soon here.
Yeah.
I'm worried more about us performing at home this weekend than I am about performing in DC for some reason. I just feel like even like, if Chicago is any indication, where we have a game where we can handily get a result and we just don't. That's what worries me about this weekend. But I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I think we've been doing quite all right on the road, barring this game against Miami. So I think we'd still be able to bring that momentum into DC, where we've been playing pretty well, all things considered, in the recent past. But yeah, worried about New England, worried about dropping points. Could see this being a frustrating draw.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to say real quick that New England is a little bit parallel to Chicago as far as being, I mean, I haven't seen how they look under Porter, but I can't imagine he's changed things too much from under Arena, where they were kind of a very standard kind of 4 in the back, low block sort of team. And that just sort of took what you gave them. And that's sort of how Chicago plays. And we kind of struggled against that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think kind of on that parallel, or like that theme, we've remarked where if you want to do well, you got to win the games that you should win, not only the games that you can win. And I think, this New England game is one of those things. If you're at home, is like, are the boys going to be able to focus for the full 90 and just keep it through? Because there's been now enough games where we're just not finishing out necessarily for a win.
Yeah, and this could be a big week for getting some distance between us and the rest of the table. It's notable right now that the league is very tightly packed. There's been a ton of draws so far this year. So right now, we're in 4th place in the East and DC's in 9th, but the difference is only 3 points. Mm-hmm. The 4th place through really like 12th place, that's a difference of only 6 points here. And I think getting a little bit of separation and trying to really like more clearly assert ourselves in that sort of top 3 along with Miami and Cincinnati could pay dividends, especially as we're going into the summer. Because I do think in MLS, this is true, I think, in a lot of leagues, but particularly so in MLS, having that psychological edge of just getting into the back of other teams' heads as they come to visit you about like what their expectations are goes a long way. I mean, that certainly was very effective for the team in the 2010 to 2018 period. A lot of teams showed up to RBA thinking, oh, maybe we can get a point. And then some teams, I think, were just thinking, let's get out of here with our pride intact. We still have quite a way to go to achieve the latter, but if we can position ourselves to be more clearly a top of the table team, rather than sort of stuck in the muck throughout the season, I think that'll make our jobs easier for ourselves.
Yeah, and I am worried that again, it's been a month since the team's had a win, and I think it is. I can't remember if this was last week or the week before, where I sort of had a little sort of monologue about how part of being a front runner and part of the benefit of being a front runner is that your team itself has high expectations of itself and wants to be the best it can be and has a perfectionist streak and wants to win every game possible to maintain that form. And now we're pretty definitively out of that mode. I think the moment has finally arrived where there's not really anything perfect to preserve anymore. So I am worried that could compound any sort of summer slide. So that's sort of what I'm watching here, and hoping that the team sort of nips that in the bud with a couple good results here.
I think it sounds like a good plan for us. I'm hoping Frankie and Mike can play 90 minutes, but I think it's also troubling that, he's working his way back to fitness and we're going to have 3 games in 2 weeks here. So I think another example to really just show it the limited depth for our squad. But I think 4 points is achievable here.
We're finally gonna your boy Doncor is finally gonna have his moment. I think
Get his time to bleed
this
out.
week.
Yeah.
It's Donkin time.
The Donk Kings.
Boom, 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 boom.